Aliens ate my homework. We're on chapter 14 today called Bonehead. Where we left off last time, remember Rod was 2 inches tall. They had flown back in the ship to Rod's house because BKR was going to kidnap one of his family members. And Gracker had pushed Rod out of the tree and he was falling towards the ground. So that's a problem. So chapter 14, Bonehead. I had only fallen a couple of feet, though it seemed as if I had gone much farther, when a strange feeling forced me to grab my belt buckle. Somehow, I knew I was supposed to do something with it. The problem was I wasn't sure what. I started poking and pushing frantically at the buckle as I flashed past the white blossoms that covered the tree. Suddenly, Tar Gibbons was next to me. "The center button!" it cried, stretching its long neck forward so that its face was close to mine. "Push the center button." Something clicked in my brain, and instantly my fingers found the button. I pushed it, and my fall began to slow. Soon I hung suspended about 2 feet above the ground, though at my size, even 2 feet looked like a long way down. Then, as if a computer program had been loaded into my brain, I knew how to make the belt lift me again. Twisting a pair of buttons, I floated up to join Tar Gibbons, who was hovering a foot or so above me. It smiled, and together we flew back to where Gracker was waiting, about halfway between the ship and the low point of my fall. "What happened?" I asked. "How come I know what to do?" "Snout implanted the knowledge in your head," said Tar Gibbons. "However, your premature severing of your connection to him hindered your ability to access the information. That was why I had to prompt you. Giving you the first hint should have opened the gateway. I suspect that you now have full access to the information you need to control the belt." I knew the tar was right, without knowing how I knew. Twisting the dials, I flew in a circle around them. It was wonderful. Unfortunately, I had no time to enjoy it. "Okay," I said, "I can handle myself. Now what do we do?" "We sneak inside to see what we can find out," said Gracker. "That's your first job, to tell us the best way in." I thought for a moment. We can't count on any of the windows being open. They might be, but it would take us a while to check them out. There's a crack in the cellar door that might work, but we could get stuck there. I know. We can go through the pet flap in the kitchen door. "Pet flap?" asked Tar Gibbons. "It's a special little door that lets the dog go in and out on its own." "Very thoughtful," said Tar Gibbons approvingly. I decided not to tell it that Mom had installed the flap more for our convenience than for Bonehead's. "Lead the way," said Gracker. Tapping the controls on my flying belt, I zoomed around the corner of the house. I loved the fact that I could use the thing so smoothly as if I had been flying with it for years. I wondered if Snout could do a training transfer that would teach me how to play soccer without tripping over my feet. That thought flashed in and out of my head. The thought that stayed was the question, who's in the house? Bonehead's door flap was about 6 times higher than I was now, and so thick I could barely grip it in my hands. It took all 3 of us to lift it far enough so that we could slip underneath. Gracker, who was even stronger than he looked, was able to hold it up while Tar Gibbons and I scurried through. Then he joined us. Someone was sitting at the kitchen table. Before I could see who it was, Bonehead came skidding into the room, barking and growling. Gracker, Tar Gibbons, and I flew straight up. We landed on top of one of the cupboards. "We can hide here," I said, stepping behind one of Mom's vases, a flowered thing that loomed above me like a monument. Gracker and Tar Gibbons joined me. Bonehead stared up at where we had gone and continued to whine. "Gracious dog, whatever is the matter with you?" asked a creaky voice. My eyes went wide with surprise as I recognized the voice. Gracker put his face next to my ear. "Who is it?" he whispered. "Mrs. Nesbit," I replied. "She's this old lady my mother helps out sometimes. I have no idea what she's doing here." Just then, Little Thing 1 came running into the kitchen. "I thought Snout said the twins weren't here," I said. I spoke louder than I had intended, which started Bonehead barking again. "Look again," said Tar Gibbons. stretching its neck over my shoulder. That is not your sister. The surge of relief I had felt at seeing little thing 1 disappeared as I realized that Tar Gibbons was right. In fact, now that I looked more closely, I was surprised I had been fooled for even a moment. Whatever had just run into the kitchen wasn't Linda, but some sort of sloppy copy of her. Low-grade simulacrum, muttered Grecker. I wonder why the old woman doesn't realize it. Her eyesight is terrible, I replied. I happen to know this for certain because one of the things my mother sometimes did for Mrs. Nesbit was read the newspaper to her. We need to find out what she knows, said Tar Gibbons. Mrs. Nesbit stood and shuffled over to where Bonehead stood yapping at us. You just hush, she said, giving the dog a little slap on the top of his head. You'll disturb the children. Bonehead whined and sank back on his haunches, but continued to stare at the top of the cabinet. How can we talk to her? I asked. We have to go back to the ship, said Tar Gibbons. Huh? Phil can set it up from there. Don't argue. Just tell us how to get past the dog. We can't get through the flap while he's sitting there. His biscuits are in a box on the top shelf, I said. If we drop one of them on the other side of the room, it should distract him long enough for us to get out. Good, said Gracker. Do it. Me? He's less apt to get upset with you than with either of us. Less likely to eat you, for that matter, said Tar Gibbons calmly. I sighed. Touching the front of my belt, I floated from the cabinet down to the shelf. Bonehead started barking again. He didn't stop, even when I disappeared into the box of dog biscuits. The smell inside the box was overwhelming. The biscuits were as long as I was tall, and I wasn't sure I would be able to lift one. But as soon as I grabbed one, it seemed to become weightless, so I guess the anti-gravity function of the belt extended to anything I was holding. I floated out of the box with the dog biscuit. Bonehead's barking got louder than ever. What is it? Cried Mrs. Nesbit. Barking and yelping, Bonehead chased me across the kitchen. I realized that he could swallow me in one bite. I wondered what it would be like to be eaten by my own dog. Mrs. Nesbit tried to grab him, and for one horrible moment, I was afraid he was going to trip her. Fortunately, he slid around her. Yipping and howling, he followed me and the dog biscuit out of the room. When I got to the dining room, I dropped the biscuit behind a chair in a spot where Bonehead could get it, but not without a little work. Here's the picture. As he dived for the biscuit, I turned around and flew back to the kitchen, this time skimming along the ceiling where I knew Mrs. Nesbit was unlikely to see me. Tar Gibbons and Gracker were waiting at the pet flap. Seconds later, we were outside again. All right, that should do it, said Phil a few minutes later. Give it a try. We were back in the ship, and the aliens had set up a system to make a phone call into the house, along with an amplifier that would make my voice loud enough for Mrs. Nesbit to hear me. A ringing sound came from the wall where Phil did all his work. After the first ring, I heard a shriek. It wasn't the phone, it was Plink. The little creature was clinging to Phil's main stem and peeking at me from between two leaves. Another ring, and then another. Then, hello? Hello, this is Rod. Is my mother there? I had almost said, what happened to my mother? But I realized that would sound suspicious, since supposedly I had no idea that she wasn't there. Is that you, Rod? This is Mrs. Nesbit, dear. Where are you? Your mother is out looking for you. What? Well, the school called and wanted to know where you were. They said you didn't show up this morning. Are you all right, dear? Your mother was awfully worried. Anyway, she asked me to watch the twins while she went to look for you. You know I hate to do that. They make me so nervous, but they're behaving quite well, thank goodness. I felt terrible. Mom must have been worried big time if she asked Mrs. Nesbit to watch the things. She was probably driving all over looking for me right now. Has anyone else been there this morning? I asked. Why, yes, dear. That nice Billy Becker stopped in a while ago. Shouldn't he be in school too? And where are you, dear? Your mother is awfully worried. Tell her I'm fine. Ask her if BKR left a message, whispered Madame Pong. I nodded. Mrs. Nesbit, did Billy leave a message for me? Now let me think. Oh, yes. He said to tell you that he would be waiting for you out in Seldom Seen. He said he has something that you would want. What does that mean, Rod? And what is going on anyway? Your mother is awfully worried, dear. You're not doing anything dangerous, are you? The only way to answer that question without lying was to ignore it altogether. Tell Mom not to worry about me. Tell her I'll be home as soon as I can. I hung up. Where is Seldom Seen? Asked Cracker. It's the family name for the place I took you the first day you landed, when you tried to enlarge the ship. How does BKR know about it? Asked Snout. He was leaning against the doorframe at the far side of the room. I was relieved to see him up and around, though that relief was short-lived when Madame Pong exclaimed, Snout, you should be resting. No time for that, he said, waving his long fingers. How does BKR know about this place, Rod? I took him there once. I blushed a little. I was trying to make friends with him. I thought if I made friends with him, maybe I could get him to stop beating me up. Nice idea, said Cracker. Wrong bully. Phil set course for Seldom Seen. But I don't understand, I said. Why would Billy kidnap the twins and then tell us where he has them? What's the point? The point? Asked Cracker. It's to get me, of course. He's using your siblings as bait. Naturally, he is also enjoying the fact that it is causing you a lot of mental pain. But I'm the one he wants to catch. Seldom Seen, straight ahead, burped Phil, surprising me, until I remembered how fast the Furkle could travel. Uh-oh, looks like trouble. Show us, said Cracker. Phil flipped a switch. A huge view screen appeared on the wall. It showed the field. When Phil stretched out a tendril and twisted a knob, the image on the screen zoomed in on the center of the field. BKR stood there, smiling evilly. Madame Pong gasped. It took me a moment to see what had upset her. Then I spotted the twins. They were floating about 30 feet above the ground. Beneath them was an open pit with long green flames shooting out of it. BKR made a gesture as if by magic. Fiery purple words appeared in the air above him. Cracker, surrender your ship and your crew, or else it's time for a barbecue. Okay, next will be chapter 15.